Okay, I need to talk about Duncan Walpole. You know Duncan. Remember, the assassin who appears at the beginning of Black Flag? And with Resynced around the corner, I thought this was a good time to talk about certain parts of the narrative, especially the beginning. Because as we know, beginnings in storytelling are very important. It's what leaves us with an impression. And someone who does leave me with an impression is Duncan Walpole himself. Oh, and that's not because he's a great character, or he's memorable in any sort of good way, but because Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag somehow managed to create what I believe to be the worst assassin in the entire franchise. And they did that within literally 15 minutes. 15 minutes. It's all deliberately done though, by the way, let me make that clear. See, in most characters, you would assume they need at least, maybe half the game before they start truly disappointing us. But Duncan's like, look, hold my hidden blade, and fumbled every single thing an assassin is supposed to stand for before the opening credits have even finished rolling. So today I thought, you know what, let's just do a little deep dive into the man, the myth, and the complete liability that is Duncan Walpole. So, for any of us who need a quick refresher, especially for the people whose first time going to be experiencing Black Flag is going to be through Resynced, here you go. It starts in the year 1715. We're playing as Edward James Kenway, a Welsh privateer turned pirate who's very charming, very reckless, and as you will find out throughout the story, is kind of someone who becomes very obsessed with his own sort of goal. And it's funny, right? Because all of this stems from his encounter with Duncan Walpole. That just rhymed. And this is the thing, right? Edward isn't an assassin at the beginning, and to be honest, he's not really an assassin for the majority of the whole game, but he kind of just stumbles into that sort of world by accident. And obviously that accident in question is Duncan Walpole himself. See, Duncan is an actual assassin. He's actually a master assassin, which makes this even more funnier for what's about to happen to him in like 10 minutes time. So obviously he's been trained, inducted into the Brotherhood, fully initiated. But, he's kind of on the run, or he's kind of fleeing, and he stumbles upon Edward's ship. But there's a storm going on, and this storm causes these two to both get kind of like shipwrecked into the same island. So that's their first encounter. As we find out, Duncan wants to get to Havana more than anything, but Edward, obviously, being a pirate, kind of wants something out of it. So Duncan's like, you know what, forget this guy. And I kind of respect this. He's like, let me just silence this guy, and he's getting on my nerves. So he tries to shoot him. Oops, gunpowder is wet. But this is the key thing here, right? Duncan is severely injured. Now this is key, because I know a lot of people sometimes have a few little complaints in terms of how his fate is handled, but we'll get to that. So let's talk about Duncan's existence within the narrative. See, he was on his way to Havana to betray the assassins and join the Templars. See, he's carrying something very important on him, which he's going to deliver to Governor Torres. And that's it, basically. That's his whole entire character trait. I mean, at least he has something going for him. Now, the problem is, right, being a sort of double agent or a traitor, you would assume that he would be very careful. He'd be quite patient, they're very calculated, especially since that he grew up and was an actual master assassin. Now, granted, he probably didn't expect the storm, but still, Duncan shows up in his own betrayal, basically absolutely fumbling at every single step. He has stolen intelligence, as I mentioned before. He has maps, codes, and information for the Templars, and this special piece of Isu technology. And his whole entire plan was just to waltz into Havana and hand it over in exchange for, I guess, money and plus the chance to join the Templars? I think it is. I can't remember. He wants to join the Templars, right? Okay, cool. Simple plan. So, what does he do? He picks a fight with a random pirate on a shipwrecked beach, loses that fight, and then dies. And yeah, that's the end of the legendary Duncan Walpole. He just dies. And this is the thing, right? At this moment in time in the story, as I said, we don't really know who Edward Kenway is. He's just a random pirate, and clearly that's what Duncan is assuming as well. But this is the thing. The fight between the two is so easy. All you have to do is press circle and square and you one-shot them. And that's what an issue of Black Flag's combat that I have. It's too easy. So I do get where some people say, well, we beat Duncan very easy. How did Edward beat him? Well, there's actually a lot of reasons why Edward beat him very easily. The main one is that Duncan is severely injured after the sort of shipwreck. You see it around his stomach or chest area. He is injured. Edward isn't. Edward was just kind of just catching his breath again. Duncan has been severely like stabbed in the chest or cut or whatever it is, right? So it makes sense. So no matter how skillful he is, he's not going to be at his full capabilities because he's severely injured. Now, granted, he probably shouldn't have even tried to pick the fight with Edward. That was the biggest mistake, right? That's what makes him a bit of a clown. But the main reason is that Edward himself is just naturally skilled. See, if you remember certain parts of the narrative, there is a lot of times where quite a few characters praise Edward's abilities, especially the mentor of the assassins during this time period. This is someone who doesn't acknowledge Edward or even likes the way he's going about things, but they literally say they cannot deny that he has a lot of skills. This also plays into why Edward is very naturally gifted in parkour, because there's a moment early on in the story with Stede Bonnet where Stede's impressed and Edward's explaining why he's so good at parkouring. Right? See, there's reasons why Edward is doing a lot of things which are very similar and akin to what an assassin would do. It also plays into another moment where he's speaking with Mary Read, and he's talking to her about how he's always had this sort of sixth sense when he was younger, which he's obviously talking about eagle vision. So yet again, it's just another thing that kind of just makes Edward on the same sort of level in terms of like combat and skill and obviously all these other sort of traits to an assassin, even though he's not one yet. And the key thing is his adaptability. See, remember when he infiltrates the Templars when he's acting as Duncan Walpole? Remember, he has the hidden blades, and they asked him, can they show him a few of the moves that he picked up when he was an assassin using the iconic hidden blades. Now remember, Edward has no clue what these are, he's never used them in his life, but this is where one of his key skills comes into play. He's a very good in the moment sort of character, in the moment sort of person. His adaptability, and he manages to pull off all these moves to perfection. And what I like is then he embodies that with obviously his own sort of main goal going forward in terms of his skill set, and that's why we see him doing a lot of stuff like this, right? And he only gets more stronger and powerful as time goes on. And that's why he defeated the legend Duncan Walpole so easily. But before we wrap this up, let's talk about his legacy, right? So, he appears for around 10 to 12 minutes of gameplay, he has a handful of lines, he fights Edward, then he dies. And then he's never mentioned again in any sort of memorable way. And it's crazy, right? Because this is what kickstarts Edward's sort of journey, and which becomes an obsession about trying to find this place called the Observatory, which ends up him getting mixed up between the Assassin and Templar War. If he doesn't encounter Duncan Walpole, he probably doesn't find out anything about this. Now, knowing Edward, he probably would have ended up getting mixed up in all this sort of stuff. That's just the sort of character he is, right? So you could say that Duncan might be the most important character in the whole entire narrative. But I'm curious, where do you rank Duncan amongst the worst characters in Assassin's Creed history? Do you also agree with me in terms of why he got defeated so easily? If so, please let me know in the comments down below, and that just rhymed, and I will see yous in the next one.
Bloody fucking pirates!